Do your players trust you? Yeah, let's fix that. I spent the past couple weeks obsessing over how paranoia plants its seeds into our brain, and all the way down the rabbit hole, I found the original recipe. While many monsters can inspire fear, there is one type of creature that is designed for the more subtle art of paranoia, of making you doubt your own senses, to the point of wondering if your own child really is your child. Paranoia is the specialty of the Fae, and the good news is we can steal their tricks and reverse engineer them to work in any context. Welcome to Fae Week, where you'll see a bunch of TTRPG content creators come together under the moonlight to share stories around the same theme. And here we'll be taking your players through 4 stages of paranoia, from the first moment they notice something is off, to the moment where they can trust absolutely nothing and no one. And with each stage, I'll give some messed up but very actionable GM moves and paranoia mechanisms directly plucked out from the playbook of the Fae. And to do so, I had to consult the tomes. The tomes as in writings from psychologists, because paranoia is very real and genuinely awful to experience. Unless you're playing a silly goblin game where the players have consented to exactly that. So, the first thing I found was several stages of paranoia proposed by a very serious psychologist guy called Daniel Freeman and his colleagues. They say the very first stage, the gateway into paranoia, is something called interpersonal sensitivity. Got it. What I got from it, after reading it like 5 times, is that it's a heightened awareness of what's around you. You're picking up on things and watching out for signs. In the clinical version, it's specifically about people and your interactions with them, because in the real world, it's people who would be out to get you. But in TTRPG, there's also monsters and haunted places and a bunch of things that go bump in the night. So I'm gonna take the bit that I want, the heightened awareness, and ditch the rest. Thank you for your hard work, Mr. Psychologist, sir. So for a TTRPG, the first stage of paranoia is getting your players to noticing there's something here and now I'm paying attention. Noticing things, recognizing patterns. And if you've seen like a movie ever, you already know how it works. When something scary is about to happen in a movie, the music changes before you see anything. You've been given a cue, and even if you haven't seen the shark yet, your brain is already on high alert. Spielberg has trained you like a dog. Like Pavlov's dog, specifically. As in the Pavlov effect, a conditioning to respond a certain way to a specific stimulus. So as a GM, your move is to establish cues. When you create a monster, a location, an NPC that you want your players to be paranoid about, you don't start by introducing it. You start with creating a set of aesthetic elements, or cues, that herald its presence. The Fae are masters in this art. Their presence is foreshadowed long before it is seen. In Folklore, we find a wide variety of signs that the good neighbors are here. Objects go missing or gifts suddenly appear. Milk spoils before it should. Laughter or music echoes from somewhere deeper in the woods. Fairy rings turn up overnight. Before the Fae reveal their presence, there are signs. If you want to see how that would work at the table, I once had players in a dark underground maze. In there, they heard 2 knocks echoing from further in the maze, and every so often they would hear the 2 knocks again, a little closer each time. No explanation, just a pattern, toying with their fear of the unknown. You're training them to associate a stimulus with some kind of mysterious force. The signs accumulate, the players are paying attention, and we're ready to sink deeper. Although, so I may have gone a tiny little bit crazy with my research. If you just want the GM tips, feel free to skip. I think this is gonna be good. I thought the Fae would be a pretty convenient parallel for a video about paranoia. Turns out there's a lot more to it than that. Before psychology, before modern medicine or science, how did we explain the inexplicable? We created a monster to blame. We invented a story to make sense of it all. For example, in the 19th century, New England had a big vampire scare. Tuberculosis was raging and nobody really understood it. The symptoms and the appearance of the dead reinforced existing vampire folklore, so naturally, we dug out the bodies, decapitated them, pulled out the heart, and burned it. Because no, son, that's not Auntie Abigail, that's a vampire, and that's how you get rid of a vampire. Now eat grandma's ashes, son, it will cure you. Okay, maybe the way I'm saying it is a bit reductive. There's a lot more to it than just people turn to superstition to explain scary things. Maybe sometimes it's not really superstition, but more like a metaphor. Like maybe mermaids were a personification of the dangers that sailors faced at sea. Whether the general population believed in these tales or not, historians have found time and time again folklore that matches whatever people were actually terrified of at the time. And yet, there's something different about the Fae. Most monsters in folklore are pretty straightforward. Vampires drain and kill you. Sirens drown and kill you. Those guys are terrifying, sure, but like at least you know where you stand with them. They do mean you harm. Zero ambiguity. What about the awkward in-between? That feeling that something is off, but you can never quite figure out exactly what. Someone that you knew well suddenly acted different. Maybe they were possessed by the fairies. A child who didn't behave as expected maybe was replaced by a changeling. But now we have research that could explain it as dementia or psychosis or autism. But back then, the things that felt off but didn't quite represent a certain threat, it could have been the Fae. And that's not rational fear of something that wants to kill you, that's paranoia. Look at the actual folklore around the Fae. You don't know what they want, they speak in half-truths, and you can never take anything they say at face value. They have strict rules and etiquette, but you don't know these rules, so you could easily commit a misstep that results in big consequences. They use illusions, so you can never really rely on your own senses. Each of those traits is a paranoia trigger. They don't represent the fear of a confirmed threat, they represent the fear of not knowing. They're an unanswered question. That's paranoia. And also the whole premise of the next stage. For stage 2, I'm gonna talk to you about clowns. Years ago, I did some clowning and I was taught something kinda weird about clown makeup. The stereotypical clown makeup from movies? Yeah, actually pretty bad for a clown. Real clowns have to be really careful about not messing with their human face features, especially mouth and eyebrow shape. If I modify these too much, I'm gonna make a kid cry, which I was then told is not the goal of being a clown. Damn, missed opportunity here. Anyways, but why though? That's because the mouth and the eyebrows are a big part of how humans read faces and emotions, and it's unsettling when something looks almost like a human face but I can't read it. The Fae kind of feel like that. Not entirely foreign, but not quite human either. Sometimes they may look like it or behave like it, but there's always these little details that feel off. And there's a name for this, the uncanny valley effect, coined by a robot scientist who found that we're very fine looking at humans or at very robot looking robots. But the in-between, where the robot looks almost human but not entirely, that's very unnerving. We're gonna play with that in-between and expand it a bit. Like, make it not just about human or not human, it's gonna be familiar and safe or scary and deadly. And we don't want either of these things, because paranoia is in the inability to categorize something as friend or foe. Because even if something is obviously scary and deadly, at least you know how to act around it. You get ready to roll initiative. I offer you a new Game Master toy, the Strangeness dial. Like a dial that goes from black to white, and your goal is to stay in the gray area, to make sure that the question, am I safe here, never gets answered. Whenever you get too close to one extreme, you do something from the opposite extreme's playbook to come back to center. And it works with anything. Monsters, people, but even items or locations. Example, a quaint little village. When the player starts feeling a little too safe in there, you pull something messed up, like there's a few houses that are entirely boarded up, or some people stare at the PCs expressionless for maybe a bit too long. And when players start to feel a bit too in danger, we pull something normal and reassuring. Kids playing a game of hopscotch and arguing over whose turn it is, or nice gardens tended with lots of care and personal touches. And you just keep doing that, so players can never make up their mind about this place. Oh, and if you want to make it even more messed up, I like the idea of combining the Strangeness dial with another GM move, which is having the wrongness expressed by things that can't explain themselves, like animals and nature. In the village, dogs stand perfectly still, not wagging their tails, staring at something, not even blinking for way too long. Dogs don't do that, they should not be doing that. But there is something so wrong out there that nature and animals are picking up on it. And it's not like you can ask the dog, unless you conveniently have speak with animals prepared. But then will it really be reassuring when the dog tells you it doesn't have words for the wrongness that it saw? Okay, so when we get to stage 3 is when we GMs tend to have a bit of a problem. When your players have been on high alert long enough, they inevitably pick up on a few things. They notice patterns, take notes, and start consolidating them into knowledge of their enemy. And they start feeling real clever, which means we need to absolutely ruin that for them. I'm sure the Fae have some good advice. In Fae folklore, there's a lot of focus on very strict rules and etiquette. And yet, as strict as they may be, these rules are pretty confusing. Like the Fae and you are constantly engaged in a game where they know the rules, but you don't. Crossing a boundary could have big consequences, but you've no idea what the boundaries are. Knowledge is power, they say. And we've accidentally given our players exactly that by establishing cues earlier. After some time, those patterns become predictable. They fade into the background, or worse, the players interpret them as empty threats from the GM. That won't do. If I haven't completely wrecked it yet, doesn't mean I might not wreck your shit later, Steve. So whatever pattern we established earlier, we're going to mess with it now. Basically, you evolve the cues you established earlier, ideally giving some sense of escalation. We completely and utterly destroy whatever little safety your players thought they had built. For example, in that maze where my players kept hearing 2 knocks, the first way I evolved the signs is by having those knocks feel like they're getting closer. Then I made them more frequent. Then I made them more aggressive and loud. And I knew they would lose it when I finally completely break the pattern, with just one very loud knock, followed by complete silence. That'll teach them. Mine was a sound, but you can evolve literally any cue. The goal for this is to disrupt the safety that knowledge can bring, and make players understand that this knowledge was never really gonna keep them safe anyway. What this stage really is about is kind of removing what anchors your players thought they had. The patterns they thought they understood, that was an anchor. Removing your ability to orient yourself according to any existing structure. The Fae take this to the extreme once they've got you in their realm, or if you play D&D, the Feywild. But in Folklore, if you heard music in the woods and somehow decided to follow it, or maybe if you stepped into a fairy ring and were particularly unlucky, this is where you may find yourself. A realm that does not operate by the rules of our world. Stories around it tell us it's easy to get lost, with the past somehow leading you back to the same clearing. Food here is treacherous and might keep you here forever, and time does not run on the same clock. Every anchor you could possibly have, basic knowledge of how the world works, that's taken from you. And the more disoriented your players are, the harder paranoia gets to them. We established that something's here, that it's wrong, and that any efforts to predict it are futile. Lovely. But would it really be paranoia if it didn't feel like you, personally, specifically you, Steve, were a target? I'm gonna go back for a bit to the very real and serious psychologists whose work I've been happily misrepresenting so I can roll some dice about it. Their third stage of paranoia, which is our fourth stage, is called ideas of reference. That's believing that unrelated or innocuous things are actually connected to you personally. So like thinking broadcasts on TV have a hidden message specifically for you, or that people in the street are actually talking about you. Which I have to be clear, in real life that sounds absolutely awful and genuinely distressing and deserves support. Our players deserve suffering though, so we're gonna do something a bit different here though. We're still gonna make our players feel targeted, but in a different way. Also because there's a fundamental difference between real-life paranoia and a TTRPG. Paranoia involves delusion, believing in something that isn't here. In TTRPG, these are not delusions. Someone is actively targeting the player characters, me, the GM. I can't actually make players have delusions that they're being targeted. I don't have that kind of power. But believe me, if I did, I would misuse it. What I can do is try to make them feel what it would be like if they did have delusions. Actively targeting them, but making it that what they're experiencing, they're the only ones experiencing it. Being selective in that way is actually in the core design of fake creatures. They're often said to be invisible, or at least slightly out of sight. They use illusions, glamours disguising them, to the point there's a whole array of suggestions to increase your chances of seeing one. Being very polite, carrying a 4-leaf clover, or looking through a hackstone, which is really just a rock with a naturally formed hole in the middle. But those precautions don't guarantee seeing one. And even so, fairies choose very carefully when they can be seen and by who. Children often, or people with a very vivid imagination, were preferred. Probably so when they talk about it, people pin it on their overactive imagination. And that's the sweeter side of fairies, the part that we think about with childlike wonder. We're gonna use that, but make it suck for your players. Something has chosen them to be the only ones noticing the signs, and we can ensure that no one will believe them. Either way, I see a few ways of doing this. First, with events that only they experienced, like hearing their name being whispered, but no one else heard it. Second, stuff that vanishes before it can be verified, like finding writing on a tree trunk addressed to you, but someone else comes to check and it's gone. Or third, things that actually have a perfectly logical explanation. Like a pair of eyes seems to be following you everywhere and you just saw them again in the tree line. But anyone could tell you that was probably a deer. We've brought to your players social isolation, and all the strange that unsettles them is going to hit even harder when everything they saw is constantly invalidated. It's probably just the neighbor's kids messing with you. Are you sure you were looking properly? Maybe you're just tired, love. Gods, this is grim. I promise you I'm not an evil person in real life. Oh wait, no, one more evil thing. The cool thing about paranoia, cool for GMs, not for anyone else, is that past a certain point, it kinda tends to feed on itself as some sort of vicious circle. Once your players are on high alert for patterns, they're going to see patterns, whether you created them or they're making them up, until you do the merciful thing and just put them out of their misery. Okay, now I'm done for real. But if you're not, there's a whole lot more videos to watch from our very sane and merry crew for Fae Week. That's what I'm gonna do, and I hope to see you there. But on this note, have a good evening, and I beg of you, don't follow the music in the woods.